Hello and welcome back to the Decision Masters podcast. I am your host, Kirsten Parker, and we are talking about how to become more decisive. Yes, please. We are in the middle of a series right now with one single idea per episode. Normally, I love a list. I love like a smattering of options that we can pull from. And there's a world in which I could have done one episode with all of these bullet points of how to become more decisive. But I really want to encourage you to not overwhelm yourself. I know it's so uncomfortable for us, right? We want to do all of the things. And that is kind of a lovely segue into today's topic, which is how to become more decisive by getting better at accepting what is instead of comparing it to what it could be. The first episode in this series, I started with a story about my dad, and we're going to keep going down that road. My parents redid their kitchen several years ago, and they worked with a designer to custom design and build all of these intricate, beautiful cabinets in this space. They have quite a small kitchen, relatively speaking, but they wanted to make it beautiful and totally theirs. And they did it. And it's gorgeous. And the hood over the stove, big, gorgeous, wooden, handmade, custom designed oven hood, is right where my dad needs to lean if he needs to reach the back burner. It is at such a height and angle that for the first couple months he used the new kitchen because my dad is the cook, he just banged his head every every single time. And he cooks every night. It was not fun to watch or hear about because it wasn't just painful physically. It was painful because nobody caught this. How did nobody see? The designers, my dad, who has architecture in his background, and he helped design and plan and build everything. How did no one see that this was going to be right where this person's head needs to go? It's painful because you can't go back. And he had the option to redesign and recommission and reinstall an entirely new one and take the entire thing apart and have them put another thing back together. But he was not going to do that. So here we are in reality, where his options became accept what is or compare it to what it could be. And I told you, he cooks every single night. So that would be a lot of time spent comparing what is to what it could be every night, night after night, week after week. That would be a lot of brain space dedicated to focusing on lack, focusing on what something isn't. If you imagined a pie chart, if you will, and the pie chart represented where your mental energy was spent in a year. I'm making big googly eyes. If you're not watching on YouTube, their eyes are open. Where your mental energy spent over the course of an entire year. First of all, that's kind of wacky to imagine, right? But if you do something every single night and you spend most of that time focusing on how it's pissing you off because it's not how it could be, what do you think that ends up looking like on the pie chart? You know how you can see parts of the Vegas Strip from space? What is it? You can see the sphere from space or something. I feel like most of our mental energy goes to places we might not be able to see if we zoom out far enough. For over a year, how much mental energy did you give your shoes this year? I don't know. You're probably not going to see that on a pie chart of the entire year. But if you spent every single night focusing on how this isn't, that would show up. That would actually take up a big chunk of that pie chart. 365 nights of focusing on how you made a mistake, of how something isn't how you want it. Ugh, right? Here's the point. Do you have the option to change something you don't like? Sometimes, yeah. And I encourage you to find all of those options. Believe me, we don't want to just settle for thing after thing after thing that we don't like. Because we can, we're adaptable, we can settle. And we don't want to spend our lives settling for the sake of being adaptable. So, absolutely, by all means, if you don't like something, find the options for how you could change it. But in the effort of becoming a more decisive person, it serves you greatly to become better at accepting what is, accepting reality for what it is, instead of comparing it to what it could be by default. How is this going to help you become more decisive? To be decisive, you have to mentally be in the present moment, physically here now, working with what we got to work with. A lot of the times when I'm working with people who think of themselves as indecisive and they're not taking decisive action as much as they want to in their lives, one of the problems is that they're spending too much time in a different reality. They're not here. They're not working with what we have to work with in the room right now. They are mentally too preoccupied with how things aren't. And part of getting better at accepting reality means getting better at processing feelings because you don't have to like something to accept it. If you don't like it, you actually need to process the emotions coming up with not liking it before you can fully accept it. So I don't mean just deal with it, shove your feelings back in your pocket. Brr. I don't know what that voice was. No, I mean really get better at it. This is a skill you need to improve. Get better at getting to a place where you can accept what is so that you can work with the given circumstances and all of your resources and your honest desires and boundaries and make a decision in the present moment. Whatever you got to do to get better at accepting what is for you to determine. But it might involve getting better at noticing your feelings. You might be overly inclined to adapt to things you don't like. You might be used to shoving those feelings down and not even letting them really come out because, ugh, this is another thing I don't like, but let's just keep powering through. That's a big way people end up showing up to their life day after day, focusing on what it isn't because they haven't let themselves fully be honest that that's not what they like. They don't like it. And they feel bad about it. They feel bad, negative emotions that they're not letting themselves feel and process. So they're not putting themselves in a position to make a decision to change anything. They're just showing up being like, I have to put up with this. That is a good indication that it might be time to get more in touch with your feels. And it might not feel good because I got to tell you, personal experience talking right now, it's not always fun to really be honest about what you don't like about your life. So, yeah, it might not feel good, but it's going to put you in a position to be more decisive. I don't mean to overemphasize how it doesn't feel good. I just want you to know if you have any trepidation about being honest about what you don't like about reality, I'm going to say fair. I'm going to validate that. It's sometimes it's not fun. And what we fear really is that we are going to see what we don't like and we're going to be honest about it and we're going to feel the feelings and we're not going to change it. That's what we're really afraid of. We're really afraid once we see something, we can't unsee it. Once we're honest about, I don't like this thing, we can't not know that. And we're afraid we're going to let ourselves live with that, settle for that. We're not going to make a decision. So I need you to muster all of the self-trust that you have, okay? Trust yourself to make good choices and to deal with anything that happens, to figure out whatever needs to be figured out next. Know you're on your own team. You can make yourself that promise that you're going to stay on your own team and you're not going to force yourself to be unhappy forever. Now, I get that some of this feels out of your control. We can't always change the things that we're looking at honestly and don't like. This is where we come back to our main objective today, which is to be more decisive. And we exercise the skill that we're focusing on today, getting better at accepting reality for what it is, not comparing it to what it could be. Because if you can't change what you don't like in the way you want to change it, the faster you can accept it and be clean about that, meaning you process the feelings that get you to the place of acceptance, which can coexist with dislike. You can accept something you don't like. The faster you can get there, the faster you can get to your next decision. If we can't change the thing, we don't want to spend our lives focusing on the thing, right? If we're not going to replace the hood of the oven, we do not want to spend our lives focusing on how it is right where we bonk our heads on it all the time. We do want you to see the decisions you can make next. And how does this contribute to you being more decisive? Not just because it puts you in a more decisive position, it puts you in a better position to make decisions, but because settling for something by default is not a decision, it's a stress response. But deciding I'm going to let myself be honest about how I feel about this thing. I'm going to process the feelings and I'm going to accept that this is the reality we're dealing with. Those are conscious decisions. And it takes a decisive person to accept a situation, even if they don't like it, from that empowered place, not from an overly adaptive, over functioning, I'm not going to give myself any other option but settle for this place. So this might have started out as kind of a simple sounding idea, get better at accepting things. But I hope the many roads we traveled on today have helped illustrate just how powerful this skill is going to be in your life, in your decision making. And I hope it helps you notice when you are contributing to the chunk of the pie chart that is focusing on what things could be but aren't, or how they should be but aren't, because you don't want to spend your life like that. It's not worth all of the time and mental energy you could pour into it. Remember, if you want help really paying attention to these habits and proactively changing them week after week, look up how we can work together. Look at the link in the show notes. Schedule a consult at kirstenparker.com/schedule. We can talk with our human faces about what we're going to work on together and how it will help you, because you don't have to settle, my friend. You do have to get better at accepting, because from acceptance, empowered decisions are possible. Stitch that on a pillow. All right. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you come back next week for our next step in becoming more decisive. I'll see you soon. Hey, want to find out your decision style? Obviously, go take the decision style quiz. It's in the show notes and at kirstenparker.com/quiz. We all have our style when it comes to making decisions, but do you know how to use your default way of thinking to your advantage? Or do you mainly get stuck in the most annoying parts of overthinking and people pleasing? The decision style quiz has your answers, my friend. Take it right now at kirstenparker.com/quiz.